Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the riverbank. It was a warm, sleepy afternoon on August 3rd, 2025, and she had nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversations? The world felt slow and ordinary, filled with the gentle hum of insects and the soft rustle of leaves. She wished for something exciting to happen, something to break the quiet stillness of the day. Little did she know an adventure was waiting just around the corner, ready to turn her world completely upside down. Suddenly, a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close by her. There was nothing so very remarkable in that, nor did Alice think it so very much out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself, oh dear, I shall be too late." But when the rabbit actually took a watch out of its waistcoat pocket and looked at it, and then hurried on, Alice started to her feet. She had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat pocket or a watch to take out of it. Burning with curiosity, she ran across the field after it, and was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole under the hedge. In another moment, down went Alice after it, never once considering how in the world she was to get out again. The rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way, and then dipped suddenly down. Alice found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep well. Either the well was very deep, or she fell very slowly, for she had plenty of time as she went down to look about her and to wonder what was going to happen next. She looked at the sides of the well and noticed that they were filled with cupboards and bookshelves. Here and there she saw maps and pictures hung upon pegs. Down, down, down. Would the fall never come to an end? I wonder how many miles I've fallen by this time, she said aloud. I must be getting somewhere near the center of the earth. She imagined strange lands and people with their heads pointing downwards. The journey felt endless, a gentle floating descent through a world of curiosities. It was not a scary fall, but a strange and dreamlike one. Finally, after what felt like an age of drifting through the darkness, she landed with a soft thump upon a heap of sticks and dry leaves, and the fall was over. She was not a bit hurt, and she jumped up onto her feet in a moment, ready for whatever came next. Alice found herself in a long, low hall, lit by a row of lamps hanging from the ceiling. There were doors all around the hall, but they were all locked. In the middle was a small three-legged table made of solid glass. There was nothing on it except a tiny golden key. Alice tried the key in all the doors, but it was too small for any of them. Then she noticed a little curtain she had not seen before, and behind it was a little door about 15 inches high. The golden key fit perfectly. The door opened into a beautiful garden, but Alice was too large to get through. Her heart sank with disappointment. Feeling sad, she went back to the table and found a little bottle on it, which certainly was not there before. Tied around the neck of the bottle was a paper label with the words, "Drink me," beautifully printed on it in large letters. It was all very well to say drink me, but the wise little Alice was not going to do that in a hurry. However, the bottle was not marked poison, so she tasted it, and finding it very nice, she very soon finished it off. What a curious feeling. She was shutting up like a telescope, and soon she was only 10 inches high, the perfect size to go through the little door. But alas, poor Alice. When she ran to the door, she found she had forgotten the little golden key, and when she went back to the table for it, she found she could not possibly reach it. She was too small. She sat down and cried. Soon her eye fell on a little glass box that was lying under the table. She opened it and found in it a very small cake, on which the words, "Eat me," were beautifully marked in currants. So she ate it and began to grow. She grew taller and taller until her head hit the ceiling. Now she was a giant, trapped in the tiny hall. Crying again, her tears created a large pool all around her. Just then, the white rabbit hurried past, dropping a fan and a pair of white kid gloves. Alice picked up the fan and, without thinking, began to fanning herself. To her surprise, she started shrinking again. She quickly dropped the fan and found herself small enough to swim in the pool of her own tears. It was a strange and salty sea. While swimming, she met a mouse who was also paddling along. Alice tried to make conversation, but her talk of cats and dogs only frightened the poor creature away. It seemed that in this new land, even simple chatter could be quite complicated. After leaving the pool of tears and meeting several other peculiar animals, Alice wandered through a wood where she found a very large mushroom. On top of it sat a large blue caterpillar smoking a long hookah. The caterpillar gave her some confusing advice about keeping her temper, and then told her that one side of the mushroom would make her taller, and the other side would make her shorter. After some trial and error, nibbling on the different sides, Alice managed to return to her normal height. Feeling more like herself again, she continued her journey, hoping to find someone a little less confusing to talk to. She soon came upon a small house and decided to investigate. As she drew nearer, she could hear a great deal of noise and shouting. Peeking inside, she found the Duchess, a cook who was throwing pans, and a baby who was sneezing from too much pepper in the air. The most curious thing of all was a large cat, which was sitting on the hearth and grinning from ear to ear. The Duchess explained that it was a Cheshire cat, and that's why it grinned. Alice had never known that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, she did not know that cats could grin at all. The entire scene was chaotic and utterly nonsensical. Leaving the peppery kitchen behind, Alice walked further into the woods. Suddenly, the Cheshire cat appeared again, this time sitting on the bough of a tree. "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" asked Alice. "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to," said the cat. It explained that one path led to the Mad Hatter and the other to the March Hare, and that both were mad. Alice didn't much like the idea of visiting mad people, but the cat assured her, "We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad." Before vanishing slowly, leaving only its grin behind, the cat pointed her towards the March Hare's house. Alice decided to visit the March Hare, and soon she saw a long table set out under a tree in front of the house. The March Hare and the Hatter were having tea at it, with a dormouse sitting between them, fast asleep. "No room! No room!" they cried out when they saw Alice coming. "There's plenty of room," said Alice indignantly, and she sat down in a large armchair at one end of the table. The tea party was the strangest she had ever attended. They asked her riddles that had no answers, told her stories that made no sense, and argued about time, which the Hatter claimed to have quarrelled with. It was all very silly and very, very confusing. Tired of the endless riddles and all that nonsensical conversation, I left the mad tea party and wandered away through the woods. Before long, I found a tree with a door in it, which was, well, rather odd. Being as curious as ever, I opened the door and, to my surprise, it led once more into that long hall with the glass table. This time, I was clever. I took the little golden key and nibbled on the mushroom I'd saved in my pocket until I was just the right size to go through the tiny door. At last, I stepped out of the dark hall and into the bright flower garden I'd longed to see. It was really a place of dazzling flower beds and cool fountains. As I looked around, I saw a procession of gardeners who looked exactly like playing cards. They were painting white roses red because apparently they'd accidentally planted a white rose tree instead of a red one, and they were absolutely terrified of the Queen. Just then, a grand procession approached. First came 10 soldiers carrying clubs. These were all shaped like the two of spades. Next came the courtiers, who were diamonds, and then the royal children, who were hearts. After them came the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them I recognized the White Rabbit. Then followed the Knave of Hearts, carrying the king's crown on a crimson velvet cushion. Finally came the King and Queen of Hearts. The Queen was a fearsome figure with a loud, harsh voice. When she saw me, she demanded to know who I was. I introduced myself as politely as I could, but the Queen was not impressed. "Off with her head!" she shrieked, a phrase she seemed to use for every small problem. The King, who was much milder, managed to calm her down a little. The Queen then invited me to play a game of croquet. I'd played croquet before, but never like this. The croquet ground was all ridges and furrows, the balls were live hedgehogs, and the mallets live flamingos. The game was pure chaos. Everyone played at once without waiting for turns, quarrelling all the while and fighting for the hedgehogs. The flamingo mallets would twist their long necks to look up at my face, and the hedgehog balls would unroll themselves and crawl away just as I was about to hit them. The Queen stomped around shouting "off with his head," or "off with her head," about once in a minute. I began to feel very uneasy. It was a very difficult game indeed, and I was ever so glad when I saw the Cheshire Cat's grin appear in the air, offering a welcome distraction from the Queen's fury. The chaos of the croquet game was suddenly interrupted by a cry that the Knave of Hearts was on trial. He was accused of stealing the tarts that the Queen had made. I was called to the courtroom to be a witness. The King of Hearts was the judge, and the jury was made up of 12 creatures, including a lizard named Bill. The White Rabbit acted as the court herald, blowing his trumpet and reading out the accusation. Honestly, the whole affair was completely nonsensical. Witnesses were called who knew nothing about the tarts, and the evidence presented was just a piece of paper with a riddle-like poem on it, which made no sense to anyone. During the trial, I found myself beginning to grow larger again, but this time I didn't feel afraid. Instead, I felt bigger, stronger, and bolder. The King and Queen seemed smaller and much less intimidating. When the King demanded the jury consider their verdict, I stood up and boldly declared that the whole thing was nonsense. "Who cares for you?" I said. I had grown to my full height by this time. "You're nothing but a pack of cards." I felt a rush of courage as I spoke, finally standing up to the ridiculous rules and the bossy Queen who had terrified everyone else in Wonderland. At my words, the whole pack of cards rose up into the air and came flying down upon me. I gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to beat them off. Suddenly I found myself lying on the riverbank with my head in my sister's lap. "Wake up, Alice dear," said my sister. "Why, what a long sleep you've had." I sat up feeling dazed and confused. Was it all a dream? I told my sister all about my strange adventures with the White Rabbit, the mad tea party, and the Queen of Hearts. It all felt so vivid, so real. My sister listened patiently, smiling at my curious tale. As I stood up to go home for tea, I put my hand in my pocket. My fingers closed around something small and curious. I pulled out a tiny golden key and a small crumbly piece of a cake with the faint letters "Eat Me" visible in the currents. I stared at them, my heart beating fast. Was Wonderland just a dream after all? Or was it a real place I might one day visit again? I smiled a secret smile, knowing that my world was now filled with a little more magic and mystery than before. The adventure I suspected was far from over.